at the time didn't feel great and was really wondering like, what can we do about this problem? But then again, when we started to think about it a little deeper, we realized that of course a big brand wouldn't want to work with us at this stage. Ultimately, big brands care about reach. They care about mass reach, not necessarily depth of engagement, but they want to reach large audiences, to reach a million eyeballs or 10 million eyeballs. And that's not something we can offer right now. But that doesn't mean what we're doing cannot be financially valuable to a particular group of people. So we figured out that, okay, if our first paper is going out to like, let's say, 1,000 or 2,000 people, which organization or group of people would care about that kind of reach? And the answer to that is local businesses, right? If you're running just a small restaurant and 1,000 people in your town discover your restaurant through an ad, and of those 1,000, 100 people go to your restaurant, that's meaningful conversion. That's a meaningful increase, in your weekly revenues, and therefore an improvement in your quality of life. And once we realized this, we bunked like 3-4 days of school, created a little pitch deck, and went knocking on hundreds and hundreds of doors of local businesses, restaurants, laundrettes, flower shops, nurseries, you name it. Every single, almost every small business in the town we covered. And by the end of those 4 days, we had hundreds of pounds in cash. People were really supportive. They thought this was an excellent idea. And we went ahead and printed our first newspaper and then ran that business for 1.5 years, 2 years. So that was the first core startup experience. And it's been 10 years since then now. And I look back very fondly upon that because I'm still very proud of the problem that we were trying to solve. It still hasn't been solved. The metro is still around and doing pretty strong in the UK, but I just love I think it's really important to pursue something that you care about, not just in the pursuit of revenue, because that rarely works. You need to really care about the problem that you're trying to solve and the change that you're trying to instigate in society. And it's not just for me, it's not just a nostalgic story. I feel that it very much defined the course of my entrepreneurial path. If you think about it, most people think about building businesses maybe when they're in college, or they've graduated, they've worked in industry for a couple of years, or when they go to business school. And the reality is that business school doesn't really teach you how to build a business. It teaches you a lot of things, but you've got to be in the trenches, right? You've got to make the mistakes, and you've got to learn from those mistakes. It's not a theoretical or academic exercise whatsoever. There's a lot of theory, and you should read, and you should invest in your learning, and I totally buy all of that. But if you want to build a company, the best way to do it is just to start a small project. Start a lemonade stand in your college, right? Because that will teach you more than your first 6 months of an MBA about how difficult it is to build a product, how difficult it is to sell, and how difficult it is to build a brand. So when I look back at that experience, and that was my first startup, Haiku Jam today is my 4th. There was 3 along the way. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that I was in a position to take that opportunity and pursue it, because if I hadn't, I'd be doing something, I'd probably be doing something very, very different today. And I feel that by no means am I an expert, and I still have a very, very long way to go. But there was a lot of lessons that I just learned early, which helped Haiku Jam and other things that we've done come into being. So let me just, fast forward a couple of years and tell you about how Haiku Jam, the current project I'm working on, started up, because it's been a particularly crazy story. Now, every creative, every artist, every entrepreneur has a unique journey, but Haiku Jam's is definitely up there in terms of star appeal. So it was born out of a very, very different idea, and Arjun briefly mentioned this in the introduction. So at the time, I was still at university. And my friends and I, we were looking to build an automated electricity and gas bill management system. Now that's a mouthful, but basically, in the UK, there's an extremely privatized electricity and gas market, very different to India. So as a homeowner, there are 25 different companies that are trying to sell you electricity and gas tariffs. And when you aggregate all the tariffs across those 25 companies, there's 60,000 different deals that you can choose from. And in economics, this leads to something called the paradox of choice. Choice is often a very good thing. If you're going down a supermarket aisle and there are 10 choices of breakfast cereal. That's good. That's better than just one choice, because it means that you can, optimize according to your preferences and get the cereal that you really like. Now imagine if there were 50,000 boxes of breakfast cereal. You're not going to go through those 50,000. You'll probably look at 1, 2, maybe 10, and then make your decision. And I mean, it's only breakfast cereal, so it doesn't really matter if you don't get the one that you were destined to. But the point is that you've made a suboptimal decision in a marketplace because you couldn't view and understand all of the choices. This is an asymmetric information problem. And that's exactly what's happening in the energy sector, even today in the UK. Prices change every 30 minutes. So as soon as you've chosen a deal, 30 minutes later, that's probably not the cheapest deal anymore available for you. So we thought this was crazy. £5 billion a year is wasted because people don't proactively switch. You can switch almost every 3 months, but people don't do it. When we were thinking about the idea, again, I went to my dad and said, which energy provider are we with? And he said, we're with British Gas. Now, British Gas is actually one of the most expensive, and then I asked, how long have we been with British Gas? And he said, we've been with them for almost 4 or 5 years. Which was crazy because there are, we could have saved a lot just by proactively switching. But switching is really difficult. You've got to do online. Just please raise your hand if anyone understands what a kilowatt hour of gas even means. Exactly. That's the issue. You have no idea what it means. So you're just paying and paying and paying and hoping that, your lights work and your stove is okay. And beyond that, you don't want to meddle too much in case something goes wrong. Now, we thought this was insane. We thought that this is the 21st century and it's not even complicated. It's not even a complicated technical problem. We should do something about this. So we built a system that would automatically switch the British homeowner onto the cheapest available deal whenever their deal expired. So that would mean that you would pay us a direct debit of just £2 a month. That's 24 British pounds a year. And every 3 months or so, we'd automatically switch you. So you no longer even have to worry about which provider am I with, am I on the cheapest deal, do I need to keep understanding this marketplace? Our algorithms would track and switch automatically. It was rarely are the unit economics that elegant. We could, for £24 a year, we could save the average home £450. So it was a cool idea. We went to a Google hackathon, we won it. Within a couple of weeks of that, we'd raised some funding, and it was very, very exciting. My mother was actually terrified because she thought I was going to drop out of college to pursue this, and being, an Indian mother, she really wanted me to at least get my undergraduate degree. But I told my college and I told my parents that if we get the legal approvals we need for this idea, then I'm going to pursue it, because there was, serious venture funding awaiting us, and ultimately this is what I felt that I really, really wanted to do. I wanted to pursue a path of entrepreneurship, and my personal plan before I even started university was that in my final year, I'll set something up, graduate, and then dive full-time into it. So this was a summer break, and we were excited. We were super pumped. We were working very, very hard. And we'd started building out the technology, and the system wasn't difficult for us to build. That wasn't the challenge here. The challenge was very much legal, regulatory, and political. We needed to get the approvals we need. We need to get the right approvals, otherwise our system would never be deemed legal and safe for consumers to use. So we were in touch directly with the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron's office. We were going back and forth with him. We were going back and forth with the Minister for Energy and Climate Change to really drive forward the changes in regulation that we required to build this product. Now, to cut a very long story short, we didn't get the approvals we needed. I think it became very clear to us that at the big levels of government, utilities, and industry, there's a lot of collusion. And it's only when we figured out that the core mechanics behind that collusion that we realized that this is just not going to work out. It's not feasible. Will never be, rendered legal by the government. So we had to shut down the company. We had to return money back to investors. I had to go to my college and request them to allow me to complete my final year. And being a founder, I was super low. This was like the worst thing that can happen to you when you're building something. You have this mission and dream. So I was moping around my best friend's place in London. It was 2 weeks until my final year in college would start again. And to cheer me up, he decided to take me for a cup of tea at my favorite place in Piccadilly. Now we went there, And just as the tea was arriving, I had this, I wouldn't even say it's a fully fledged idea, but this whim that where I took out my notebook and I wrote the line of a poem, and it happened to be a haiku poem. We'll get into haiku a little bit later, but haiku is very simply a 3-line form of poetry that comes from ancient Japan, right? So I wrote a first line, and I just pushed the notebook towards Shubham, and I was like, yeah, you know, you write the next line. So we did, and then I wrote the final line. And for like the next 90 minutes, that's all we were doing in complete silence. We were just collaboratively creating these little poems and little stories, and for me it was incredibly therapeutic. As many people in the room will know, any kind of creative initiative is cathartic. But it was more than that. I was amazed at how the idea evolved from one person to the other. Often when you're writing or you're working on a project, you have a specific, very clear intuition and vision for the direction of that project or that work or that story. But when someone gets involved, as in any brainstorming session, they often bring in this newfound perspective and take it in a very, very different direction. And I found that amazing at how, through this very interesting framework of haiku, that was being enabled. And by the end of the 90 minutes, I had this immense urge that what if I could create with anyone in the world like this? Not just with my best friend in a tea shop, but what if I could like send out a line and a school teacher in South Korea could pick up that line and continue the story, and then a teacher in San Francisco, or a doctor in San Francisco. And that was basically it. I fell in love with that idea. I think as a college student, many of us use social networks, and during college, I was always thinking, what is the future of this space? Because, you know, for me, like 30 minutes on Facebook isn't particularly a creative or empowering experience. I don't feel very like good about the world or the way that I'm using my time. And what if I could connect with people, with new people, not just people I know, but discover new and fascinating people all around the world, and the context of meeting them would be creativity, right? There'd be no pressure to talk, there'd be no pressure to communicate, to meet up necessarily, but we would connect and make something together. So I was excited again. I was no longer feeling low. I thought, this is very, very interesting. I just went online to see if anyone was doing something like something similar to this. And whilst there were pockets of activity, I don't think anyone had truly delivered an inspirational experience. So fast forward some months, and my friends and I, we launched a mobile application called Haiku Jam, very simply where strangers write poetry together line by line by line. So the way the app works, it's very, very simple. You just pick a topic, you write a line, you send it out, and then someone else will pick it up. They'll write the next line, and someone else will write the final line. And what's really interesting about this is that, you know, poetry, who finds poetry a little bit intimidating? Just raise your hands. Actually, let me phrase the question differently. Who considers themselves to be a poet? Nobody. That's interesting. So the point is that poetry can be a little intimidating, right? If I just said to you, if I just picked a random person with the audience, I said, hey, could you just write me a sonnet right now? That would be a little scary. Most people would not feel comfortable to do something like that. And even, forget about a sonnet, if I said, can you write me a 3-line poem, a haiku, right now? It's just 3 lines, and yet even that's difficult. Even that can be a little bit scary. So the beauty of Haiku Jam is that you're not responsible for the entire poem. You're just contributing a few words. A few words, most people wouldn't say that's a poem, that's a thought, or just, you know, a fleeting impression. But when those few words come together with someone else's few words and somebody else's few words, then it becomes something more than just the sum of its parts. It becomes a poem. And more than that, it could become newfound friendships as well, because you're not creating alone, you're creating with other people. I think one of the big issues with art, and not necessarily an issue, but it's an aspect of art, it's that it can be an incredibly lonely and isolated experience, right? When you think about the stereotypical of an artist, you don't really think about groups of people. You think about one person maybe sat away in a basement with an easel and painting. And there's obviously a place for that in the universe, but it can be very lonely, it can be intimidating, and especially for the people who aren't necessarily working in creative industries or creative professions, but would like an outlet to express, painting a canvas or writing a book, that's pretty tough. It requires a very large investment of time, emotional commitment, and energy, and most people just, they can't fit that into their day. But when all you have to do is write a couple of words and send it out, it's very accessible. It's very, very democratic, and then and it can lead to things. It can lead to a poem. It can lead to the discovery of new people, and so on and so forth. So with that, I thought what we could do today is we could experience Haiku Jam. Now the irony is that even though our core product, is a mobile app, we don't consider ourselves a technology company whatsoever. Ultimately, we care about bringing people together in a meaningful way. So at sessions like this is not about using the app in this particular room. It's about experiencing Haiku Jam with the people around you. Interact with the people you know who are in your immediate vicinity. And that's okay, you can do that, you can jam with them. But I encourage and challenge you to go and give your card to someone who you don't know very well, and maybe strike up a conversation with them. One thing we can do is maybe we can change the seating arrangement in the room if it just feels too much of, if it just feels just a little bit too regimented. But that's what we're going to be doing for the next half an hour or so. Let's see how we get on. And as the cards are being handed out, I thought I'll just give you a very quick overview of haiku poetry. And by no means am I an expert, but from my experiences, let me just share a few words with you. So the only real constraint is the 3 lines, right? If it has 2 lines, if it has 4 lines, then it's not a haiku poem, it's some other art form. Now, some people like to write within a particular framework of syllables. So, for instance, in the UK, in many schools, when kids are taught to write haiku, they're taught to write 5, 7, and 5 syllables. So the first line should have 5 syllables, the second line should have 7 syllables, and the final line should have 5 syllables. By no means do you have to follow the syllable constraint. That's just one framework. There's no core word limit, there's no core syllable limit, but it's very good to be disciplined about the words that you're using. See, the point of, writers and poets like to use a lot of words. There's this conception, it's a misconception that to convey more meaning, I have to use more words, I have to write more, right? It's not the case at all. In fact, haiku, the beauty of haiku is that it flies in the face of that ideology. You can convey an incredible amount of meaning in just a few words. So one of my mentors was an advisor to Haiku Jam as well. He put it so beautifully. He said, when I was chatting with him about the idea, he said, for me, a haiku is a tornado in a proton. And forgive the pun, but that actually blew me away because he was absolutely right. It's about creating a massive idea or distilling a moment in time in as few words as possible. And it's definitely doable. It's definitely doable. So just to make this exercise a little easier, what we've done is on the cards, we've added a word constraint, just to help you, be a little bit disciplined about the constraint and the way that you're writing and jamming. I think that's about it. What we'll do as well is, so some people may struggle to come up with a topic. A topic can be anything. So we ran a jam session in a high school in Delhi a couple of days ago, and it was amazing to see how creative kids were with the topics that they were coming up with. There was one chap who chose the topic Virat Kohli's bat, right? And the first line was something like, ouch, right? So it can be anything. It can be something philosophical, it can be based on love, it can be something very niche, it can be something extremely minute or distilled, whatever you like. But to make it easier, what we'll do is every 10-15 minutes, I'll just announce a suggested topic, all right? So I think one of the words that we can start with, which is the mottos of your school, is empower, right? So the first suggested topic can be empower. So you just choose that title, write a line, add your name, and then pass it to someone else. Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions? Was that all clear? No questions? Okay, so we'll jam now, and there's going to be some surprises at the end of the session, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it.